I'd like to commence with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation from whose lands this event is being broadcast today and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands where you are joining us from today. Feel free, of course, to make your own acknowledgement of country in the chat if you would like to do so. Let's begin then. Lesley Williams is a veteran entrepreneur and business book publisher dedicated to elevating fresh perspectives and providing a platform for specialist writers. As the person behind Major Street Publishing, she is currently expanding a worldwide imprint that showcases authority figures from Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and North America. She takes a very proactive approach to her craft, collaborating with innovative authors throughout every stage of the journey, from the initial commissioning and developmental editing to the final phases of production and marketing. Lesley, welcome to First Friday.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Hello, everybody.
Where are you coming in from?
I'm actually in Melbourne today.
Okay, and as we always like to know from Sydney, how is the weather in Melbourne?
It's actually really sunny. I've had to put the blinds down.
Okay. So we are equal. It's a glorious day here in Sydney, and I hope
Yes,
it's a
it's
glorious
lovely.
day no matter where you're joining us from.
Yeah.
Lesley, can I just start by asking, when did you start to think that publishing was the world that you wanted to work in?
Um, my father was a publisher. Our house was always full of books. I was writing poems from the age of 6. So it was always an option. So I did literature at school, I did literature and languages at university. And so the obvious job for me when I left university, what obvious to me was to train as an editor, which I did. And then my father had emigrated over to Australia, so I followed him and started working with his company, Write Books, which he started in 1990. I was horrified at working for my father in my mid-20s. I thought this will never work, but 11 years later, we'd grown the business and sold it to Wiley, so they were, fabulous years for me.
Okay. What did he publish? What was his
He
genre?
He published, when he started his own company, Write Books, he published business and finance. And the reason for that was that at the time, there weren't very many locally published business books. They were all published out of the US by companies like McGraw-Hill and Wiley. And he saw a gap in the market. And then at the same time, Australia had introduced compulsory superannuation. So people were more interested in managing their own money. There were big, I mean, if you're young, this will mean nothing to you, but there were big floats. The government sold off Telstra, they sold off the Commonwealth Bank. People for the first time were buying shares and watching their progress. So there was the start of the interest in personal finance. It was nothing like it was then back in the day. But yeah, so we sort of rode that wave of initial interest in money, I guess.
Okay. It's an interesting question then. What comes first, the book or the trend? When you're looking at as a publisher, do you go looking for certain books, or do authors come to you?
It's a mix of both. So I look at trends in Australia and overseas. I sort of group them into genres, and I suppose that's how I plan my list for the year. I would think these subjects are trending, so I'll have a couple of books in that section, maybe a couple here, a couple there. And at the same time, I'm reaching out to my networks, to authors who I know have a strong voice and saying, how about a book from you? And at the same time, I'm looking at unsolicited to see, is there anything there, new voices there?
Okay, it may have just cut out briefly then. I'm just going to continue on. Are you still with us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, good.
Yes. Okay.
So we are getting a bit of a echo coming through. I hope that's not
Are you still echoing now? Are you still
Yes.
echoing now?
Yeah.
How about if I take my headphones? Shall I take my headphones off?
No, that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, now says that okay, so there was just a small technical glitch there. We got some echo and things coming through. So you were talking about looking at overseas trends and but being Australian based. Is
Yeah.
there a difference between what an Australian non-fiction landscape looks like in the international, or is it becoming very globalized?
So there's always a local publishing element because there's always going to be subjects that are specific to Australians. So taxation, superannuation, I guess.
Mhm.
With subjects more like health and well-being, I think that's a more global landscape. And a book is only, from a commercial point of view, the wider your audience, the more you're going to sell. So if it is Australia specific, in theory, you're going to sell fewer books than if it had a global market. And on top of that, a translation market, you're going to commercially have a bigger return in theory.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there still the possibility though for very Australian specific books
Oh
in
yeah,
this genre?
absolutely. So
Yep.
if you think of a book two books recently that have done very well in nonfiction, neither of which I published sadly, but there was The Chairman's Lounge by Joe Ashton, which was a critique of Qantas. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think it won Business Book of the Year, not this year, the year before. So that did very well. It was a very Australian story. It wouldn't have sold overseas. And then I don't know if any of you follow Chris Kohler, the finance expert on Channel 9. So Alan Kohler's son, so he recently wrote a non-fiction book called How They're Out to Get You or something. Fabulous book. That sold really, really well in Australia, and it hasn't sold overseas. I don't even know if it's been. I don't know if that's a timing thing and they haven't started to sell it overseas, but it was so Australian, I would think that it wouldn't sell. But so you absolutely can. And Barefoot Investor, I don't know if you should be
Yeah.
familiar with Scott Pape.
Yes. Mm.
He sold millions of copies in Australia and very few overseas. So yeah, we have got a big enough market to make a huge success, but I would think that is in the minority, I'd say.
Uh, is that changing? That because that seems like a thing that years ago there was, and I don't even know if it's true. It may just be an urban myth that Australian voices in movies had to be redubbed into a Californian drawl so that American audiences would like not be so offended by a different accent coming
Yeah.
through. Is that still an issue, even with things that are global? Because the Qantas story, although very Australian, is in a sense a global story of privatisation and corporate behaviour. Is it still very difficult to get very Australian-based stories in non-fiction
Yeah.
into the wider
Yeah.
world?
Yeah. So
Why do you
full
think that is?
disclosure. I just think it's full disclosure. So I have been predominantly publishing for the Australian market, and it's only now that I'm with Rockpool that I'm looking for the wider global books. But already you get pushback. Oh, that cover's a bit Australian, or he said the author video when we had a couple of authors presenting their books, and they were kind of very relaxed Australians. And they, oh, it's very Australian. The sales team was
What,
very
what
Australian.
does it mean
Yeah,
that
he's
the
Australian.
cover's
What do you
too
expect?
Australian? Does it have like lamingtons and koalas, clutching $20 bills or something? What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know. They say mate too often or something. I don't know. Yeah, so that, yeah, what, I don't know. I don't want to generalize. I don't want to upset any
Yeah,
Australian Americans on the call, but yeah, I do think that they think that why would we need to listen to anybody from outside? We've got our own voices here. Yeah.
yeah. Is that true for, say, European and UK audiences and the broader, well, English-speaking audience or
I
English-reading
think
audience?
perhaps the English are probably a bit less precious. They're quite happy because they're used to listening to Americans, so why not listen to Australians as well? With my types of books, and we're going to talk about this a bit more later, one of the things that we commission on is an author platform because we need the author to help drive those sales. And when I have been involved in selling rights to European buyers, they always say, "Oh yeah, it's a great book, but do they do any work in Germany or do they do any work in France?" And that also sways their decision because they need that author to get behind the book in their territory too.
Oh, what do they mean by working? As in, do they actually run businesses or
No,
do
yeah,
consultancy with
no.
industry
Would they do they come and do guest speaker? Are they a
people?
keynote speaker over here, or do they guest on podcasts over here? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So they do
Mm.
they have that reach into a local audience?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned earlier that you do look at what's happening overseas and, reach out to people. Are
Mhm.
there trends that are coming through at the moment in the nonfiction world, especially obviously in the areas that you specialize in?
Yeah, I think the trends are always quite global. So the obvious trend is AI. Absolutely AI. The also trend that you see in the US literature is politics. Hardly surprising.
Mhm.
Politics like they're straight US politics and global politics. So they're the two big trends I think at the moment.
Okay. Is there room for an Australian voice on American politics? Because I imagine that the American politics market would be saturated with American
Yeah,
writers.
I wouldn't be commissioning in that area. I have commissioned on themes that I think are very relevant to the US. So we recently did a book called To Be Honest, which is talking about, in the era of fake news, it's more important for you to be honest in your business and in your private lives. And there's some great stories in there, about I can't remember the number exactly, but the number of times that Trump lied in his lead up to the last election was
Mhm.
only slightly higher than the time number of times that Kamala Harris lied. When you actually look like this lie, everyone's lying and this disinformation. No one can believe anything. So that I think that theme, yeah, is very pertinent to America at the moment.
Yes. What about in Australia? Do Australian political works sell well?
I haven't done much in the way of politics. We do have one book that we have entered for the Australian Politics Awards this year, and
Mhm.
it's a book about the economist Adam Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with Adam Smith.
Like the
Yeah, very
very
well
early?
known economist. Yeah,
Yeah.
1700s, I think.
Yes.
And
Okay.
this is a look at how relevant his thinking is today, and it is very relevant, and we should be listening to him more. So that was an amazing book, and we have entered that. But it's not. Yeah, is it a political? It's slightly political because it does draw on what our political leaders could be doing if they did read Adam Smith and understand what he was saying.
Yeah, I think I saw some reviews for that when it came out.
Yeah.
And Adam Smith had become one of those people that you quote but don't read.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's two books. They're like 1,000 pages each, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. I
Mm.
understand. Um, Speaking of like the American voice or the UK voice or the European voice, um, how do you, as an Australian publisher, compete on bookshelves and for eyeball space on iPhones or smart pads or wherever people are browsing for books? How do
Yeah.
you make sure that you have a really important space there?
Well, I have to say, in Australia, Australian booksellers have always been extremely supportive of local product, especially in the business books. They've all said, "Oh, it's an Australian author, great," because they think it's kind of more relevant. So it's a there's a bit of a clash. So there's the big American voices. So you've got your James Clear and Stephen Bartlett and hundreds of not hundreds, but a handful of very well-known names which keep selling year on in enormous quantities. But the Australian booksellers are very receptive to new Australian voices. They're very good. They will only stock two or three copies, and they probably won't reorder unless the books fly off the shelves. But yeah, they do prioritize Australian voices in my genres.
Okay. Well, that's that
Mm.
is that's good to know. That is good to know
Yeah,
that Australian voices are still at least getting a fair share or a fair
yeah,
shake
yeah,
of the source
yeah,
bottle, as an
yeah,
say in
yeah.
that area. I want to go back though a little bit to the beginning and to when you first started Major Street, which you said has now been for 17 years.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. What was the first book you published under Major Street?
Okay, so I'm just going to get my notes now so I can just remember all this story because it is a very interesting story. Well, I think it's interesting. So the first book that came to me was a book called Creating Wealth, Creating Real Wealth by Michael Kemp. And I had met Michael Kemp when I was the business publisher at Wiley, so I kind of knew him, hadn't published anything by him. And we did the book, and it didn't actually sell very well, but it was my first book, and I was eternally grateful that he came to me. And Dennis Jones was a distributor at the time, so I was very grateful for Dennis to take on my first book because, it was difficult times then. Borders was closing, it was difficult publishing times. So we did Michael Kemp's book, Creating Wealth, didn't do very well. About 13 years later, but on the back of that book, Michael Kemp got a job working for Scott Pape. Scott Pape had a business and a newsletter which gave share market tips, and Michael was such a brilliant share market analyst that he got a job with Scott Pape. 13 years later, Michael came back to me and he said, "Oh, I've got another book I want to do, the Ulysses Contract," and it was another share market book. And it was really good. So I thought, yeah, well, Michael didn't have much of a platform, but I thought, well, it's a very, very good book. I like it. I think there's a place for it. So we published the Ulysses Contract, and Scott Pape gave it a plug in his newsletter. So we sold 4,000 copies overnight, and we
Oh,
crashed Booktopia. And it ended up being one of my best-selling books on the Major Street imprint. And it just made me think, if Michael Kemp hadn't if I hadn't had the
started.
relationship with Michael Kemp back in the beginning and we took his book on face value and we didn't lose money on it, we certainly didn't make much money on it, but and then he came back to us and we ended up getting huge success out of him. So I think that is what I always say about publishing. It's very much a relationships game. Your authors, as one thing my dad always just tells me, your authors are your stock in trade in a business. Be nice to your authors. Cultivate those relationships because that if you without your authors, you haven't got a business.
Very, very true. Very true.
Mm.
When you picked creating real wealth, what was it
Yeah.
about it that made you think this is going to be the first one?
Um, I think it was just really solid. Like we talked earlier about an author's credibility. I mean, Michael had two or three I think he was a doctor. He was actually an orthodontist, but he was also had a PhD in finance and he was a forex trader. And he was so well read. I mean, one of the aspects of the book, Creating Real Wealth, was he drew on so many resources, so much financial literature going back hundreds of years. Like it was undoubtedly a good book. It was well researched. It was well written, and he was a absolute expert in this area. So, I think my first book had to be something that really, you just really couldn't criticize that.
Okay, okay. Would you publish it now if he came to you with that same book?
I did ask him if he wanted to update it actually on the back of the
Yeah.
Ulysses contract. And he kind of thought about it for a bit. And then he said, oh, unless Scott gave it a push, his profile was, not strong in itself. So we didn't end up doing it. But it's still a good book. It's still, yeah, it stood the test of time for sure.
Yeah. Okay. You would talk to then about authors' voices and the ability for them to do. So these are books not for an academic audience. That's true to say, isn't
No,
it? Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So how important is the ability for a writer to actually speak simple language about what can be quite complex things? My younger son is currently at university and he's going to move into financial trading of some sort. And he
Okay.
tells me what he does, and I don't understand a word. Like I nod and I pat him on the head and tell him he's clever, but I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's up to.
Yeah.
Even though I've known this kid since he was born, obviously, but he's just the jargon and even the concepts are so alien to me. I really don't understand. How does an author break through that into, what are you looking for in that
Yeah,
simple
they have to be
language?
able to write in plain English. They have to be able to write for the people that don't know nothing. You have to assume no knowledge really, or very basic knowledge. So that's something that I work with them on before it goes into the editor. So well, I very often work on my authors on a chapter by chapter basis. So
Okay.
if I think they're getting too technical, I will flag it. If there are concepts that do need explaining, we will put it in a sidebar or we will put it in a glossary. We don't want it to put the reader off and say, "Oh, this is too hard. I'm not going to do this." So I do that very much in my publishing role. And
Hmm.
then when it goes to the editors, we work with specialist business book editors who, again, they are going to be really challenging. Like, no, that is not obvious to somebody, that you need to explain that better. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't, do you ever send it out to readers who don't have any knowledge, or you've got a stable of people who actually understand the reading
No, I
process
think
that
we've
you're
got a
asking?
stable of people. Yeah, yeah. And if the author is really struggling, then we will send it to a specialist structural editor and they will do the work on it before it. Because if I haven't got time to go into that level, I will send it to the structural editor and they will work on the author to get the right tone, the right feel, and the right structure. And then I'll have another look and then it will go to the editor. So they kind of get another pass at it through a structural editor.
Yeah. Has that been a struggle for some of your authors to sort of bring the language down to a much more simple level?
No, I don't think so because when we commission authors who already have a voice. So they are giving keynotes or they are writing podcasts, guesting on podcasts or writing social media posts, blogs. So they have already tuned their voice to reach as wide an audience as possible.
Yes. Okay. Which does lead me on to another area I want to explore as to what makes a nonfiction writer. So I come to you with a book.
Yeah.
Uh, it's all about trading real estate in Sydney.
Yep.
Um, how do you know that I know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so it's very important that I meet the author. So these days it's fine to meet on Zoom. I always used to like to meet every author face to face, but since COVID, I will meet on Zoom. I will meet a couple of times. I will research their social media profile. I will listen to their keynotes if they have a keynote platform. I will tune into their podcasts. I will look at their YouTube videos, and I will talk to people who might know them. So if they're, especially if they're in real estate, I will ring up another real estate author who I've worked with for a long time, and I will say, "What's this guy like? Yeah, he's not Sean Key, is he? What do you think? What does the industry think of him?" So that's the kind of level of research I would do.
Okay. It's because there's no, unlike say academic publishing,
Mm,
there is no criteria you must have a PhD to be a professor or a tutor or a lecturer. There's
no.
nothing like that, is there?
No, no. But you can tell from their LinkedIn profile, their background, where they've worked, what qualifications they've got. I mean, you do have to take that at face value, and I'm sure some people do rely on their LinkedIn profile. But, if you just by asking other people and looking at different sources, you can usually get a fair idea of where they're coming from.
Is that more difficult, say, in the wellness sphere?
Yes, so we do wellness books, but we don't do we don't if we do a wellness subject and it crosses too much into health, where it's too much kind of a medical information, I don't really think we're the right publishers for that book.
Hmm?
If it's health, wellness, well-being, and especially if they are a psychologist or they have got some sort of qualification, that they'd need some sort of qualification to back that up.
Mhm.
But yeah, if it gets too technical on the medical health side of it, then no, we're not really qualified. We kind of play in our own sandpit with health and wellness.
Okay, then. Okay. Um,
Mm.
if a text, so a manuscript comes to you and it's going to state facts such as, the Sydney property market, just to stay on the real estate sphere, because
Yeah,
I'm in Sydney. That's all apparently anyone ever talks about.
yeah,
The Sydney real estate market shrank by 12% in 1973.
yeah.
Is that a fact that you will go and check?
The editor will immediately ask for a source to back that up.
Right.
So
Okay.
they
Yeah.
have to
So
provide, anytime they make a claim like that, they have to provide the source. We will have a look at the source. We probably wouldn't, and we have at the back of each book, we have a list of references. And so everything has to be sourced. And our editors are very well trained to say, well, yeah, where did you get that from? Yeah.
Where did you get that from?
Yeah.
Well, if it was me in and Sydney real estate, I would have been just making it up. So that would have been a fairly easy fact check, because I wouldn't have answered any of the emails from the editor about that particular fact. When it comes then to a great book and a great story, and you've sort of hinted at this when you've been talking about podcasts and Substack and profiles and things. How much of a personality or how much of a presence does an author need to have to start to make it in the world of nonfiction writing?
So we're talking about the author's platform.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
the simple
Yeah.
word.
So
Yes, yes,
yeah, okay. So it's one of the first things that I look at, I have to say, that as soon as I get a manuscript, I check out that person on social media to find out if they've got a LinkedIn following, whether they have a Substack, a newsletter, whether they're on podcasts, if they've got a YouTube channel. It's one of the first things that I look at. It's very, yeah, it's really important. It shouldn't be, and I'm almost ashamed, especially in a room full of writers, to say this. But even if it's a fantastic, amazing, brilliant book, if that author has got no online presence, then it's an immediate no from me. And the reason is because I have to sell this book to the sales team. And the first thing the sales team are going to say, well, they're going to say, oh, yeah, good book, looks interesting. But then they're going to say, who is this guy? Who is this lady? And I have to explain who she is and why people are going to buy it, because the sales team are going to ask that, the bookseller's going to ask that, and the book buyer is going to ask that. They're going to go, well, who is this person? Why should I be listening to them? Why should I be investing all the time to read their book when I don't know who they are?
yes. That's now part of and that's true in the fiction world as well. It now seems to be
Yeah,
part of the business of being a writer, is
yeah,
to pay a lot of attention to that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and if an author's a bit borderline, so I really like the book, but their social media, their presence isn't as high as I would like it. I have actually taken that book on, commissioned that book, and said, right, in the whole run up to your book, you need to be working your profile as hard as as everything else that you're doing to increase your numbers.
Yeah. Do you think there's any space left for that reclusive author, that mysterious voice that just comes out of the dark and stuns everybody?
If that voice was championed. Is that me?
No, I'm not sure. You're frozen at my end, but maybe I'm frozen as well. Might just ask. Okay. I think we've just briefly lost Lesley. We will try and get her back. Just stay with us for a couple of minutes. I'm just going to turn off our video while we try and make contact again with Lesley. I do apologize for this. We'll be back with you as soon as we can. Welcome back, and just an update. We're still trying to make contact with Lesley. Just give us another couple of minutes and we'll see what success we have.
Hello.
Lesley, you're back.
I was here all the time. I could
Were
hear
you?
you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, no, you disappeared
Yes,
from our
yeah.
feed and then you reappeared at the end of the list.
Okay,
Okay, sorry.
sorry. That's okay.
Um, Okay, so while I gather my thoughts and try to remember where we were, I think we were still talking about marketing and things. But
Right.
if there are
Yeah.
questions coming in from the audience, please, yeah, put them into the chat if there's anything that you would like to see. And yeah, there's some people coming in there saying that you weren't frozen, so not quite sure what happened because you were there and then you weren't. Okay, so it is really important then that an author not just be invested in the writing, but be invested in the business side of it, which is sort of a pun given what you publish.
There was a question in the chat that I maybe should answer there that does the publisher invest in building the social media presence? Well, the short answer is no. They might build on it. So once we have things to share, we would tag their social media presence and give them tiles to share on their platforms. But no, we wouldn't sort of start from the ground up with them to build the presence.
Yeah. It's one of the things that we will need to come back to, which is AI. Social media is very much about the individual personality of the author, not the
Yeah,
personality of the publisher, even.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So having the publisher in, or even an editor, or even a third party having their hands on someone's social media is probably not going to be the look that you're after if you're trying to build someone who wants to follow you and the story that you are telling. Okay,
Yeah.
so I do want to move on to, we've already mentioned it, and I feel like in these video chats we should almost be playing AI bingo, some sort of drinking game where, because it's going to come up eventually. But I think it's really important in the nonfiction world where, there are if you're going to be writing, say, a history book, which is not yours, there are many history books that have already been written and have been consumed by these large language model generative AIs. And you could ask it to spit out a book on pretty much any topic, and it can probably do it. What is the current state of AI in your sort of publishing niche?
Yeah, so it is a challenge. It's another competitor, I think, for our readers' attention. So, we've already had podcasts and audiobooks and Kindle books, and now we've got AI to contend with. Especially with our types of books, because they do answer a question. So it is a book, the question might be, I'm feeling poor, how can I make more money? I'm about to retire, what am I going to do with my life? All those sort of things that our books answer. And you can ask ChatGPT now or Claude, and they will give you, however much content you want on that subject. So in my commissioning now, I'm very aware of that competition from AI. And it just means that our authors have to have an interesting voice themselves. The reader journey must be interesting. So it's not nonfiction books don't, they're not boring. A nonfiction book can be as engaging, edutainment, we call it now, as a fiction book if you get it right. So it's got to be an interesting author voice. It's got to be well written. It's got to be well researched. So it has to have, backed up by the science or by other people's experiences. And it has to be a good read. And that's more and more important than just having the bare bones of the facts that you might have been able to get away with 5 years ago, 5 things that you need to do or 6 things that you need to do. This has to be like a really well written, well thought out piece of work.
Yeah. Do you have discussions with your authors about at what level they can and cannot use AI, or do
Yes.
you leave that up to them?
We're just in the throes of having kind of an AI policy from our company with our company. So the level that they can use it is they can use AI in their research, they can use it in their planning, they can use it in the structure, but they can't use it in the writing. I'm sure some of them do, and I'm sure there's some areas of books where they have got AI to sort of draft this paragraph or something, but I think getting pretty good at realizing that it's AI written. So it used to be, it was obvious things like it was the en dash, or it was, there were no mistakes in it and things like that. But now I think there's a certain AI voice. And one of the things it does is it's very formulaic. So in our non-fiction writing, it will make a statement at the beginning of a paragraph and then it will back it up with three things. So here's the statement. This is because A, B, C, and they do it's formulaic all the way through. And the other thing it does that my friend told me about, it sort of talks about gentle questioning and quiet probing and all these kind of weird expressions. I think what it's trying to do is trying to make itself sound more empathetic, where it's just sounding more like AI to us.
The only time I've asked AI to do things, I've been other than say coding, which is I think is where it really is quite valuable,
Yeah.
is it comes back with a tone that is slightly mad a lot of the time. Like it's either so positive
Yeah.
and so egregious in its use of wow guys sort of language that I know like who talks like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I recently had an author who I'd published before, and she came back to me and she said, I've got this book and my AI's written in it. Don't worry, it's trained in my voice. What do you think? And I thought, oh, I'll read it. So I read it, and it was immediately obvious to me that it was AI. And like I wouldn't have done it anyway, but I just would have thought, well, I've published her book before, so I know her voice. I'll read this other book. And it wasn't her voice at all. It was clearly an AI voice. So we didn't go anywhere with that.
It's interesting. The I've already mentioned my son, but he and I think his generation are very finely tuned to what AI is, being,
Yeah,
clearly digital native, people in their late teens, early 20s. They can spot it a mile off and they do not
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
which I think is, to me, gives me sort of hope for the future that we're not just going to become sort of drones consuming sort of AI goo as
yeah.
without pause. Where do you see AI having its impact in, say, the next 5 years?
Oh, I don't know. I read so much about this as well, about authors of thought leaders and trying to guess what's going to happen. I mean, you can be positive and say that it's a tool that will be useful and will be supportive. I honestly don't know. I think what worries me more about technology is the bias that it is creating on social media, the polarization of voices that we have now. And it worries me because I think that we're no longer capable of having a debate because people are either so right and you're so wrong, and there's no meeting in the middle. And from what I've read a lot of books on this subject. It is because the algorithms drive content onto your social media that what you're reading, they just keep reinforcing the beliefs that you already have, which diminishes the other person's belief. And I think that is, as I say, it's stopping debate. It's causing friction, violence throughout the world. And I think that is whether that is AI, whether that's the question you're asking, but technology definitely is something that is driving, and that worries me.
Yeah. Part of the worry is like Karen Wilson has a question like, how is AI changing your publishing? Do you use any tools, or is it just
Um,
is it you and your eye?
no, I do change. I do ask Claude, what people are, who are the top voices, what are the top podcasts, what are the top subjects that that they think. So yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But
But do you
then,
use like AI detection tools and
oh,
like do you,
sorry, no,
yeah.
I don't. Personally, I don't know.
Yeah. The I know that some of the questions that have been coming through have been about, social media platforms and what are the good ones. And one of the ones that you've mentioned is Substack, and Substack has recently announced that it is going to rate the AI use of things that are being put up on Substack, whether the authors want it or not. It will still allow them to put it up, but it will have a little tag down the bottom saying 40% of this article was AI produced. And it's funny, they're using AI to do that.
Crazy, isn't it? It's crazy.
It is. So does AI worry you as a publisher?
Well, it does worry me because I think it's lowering the standard of writing, isn't it? It is. If it's not original, because AI gets their work from other people. So it worries me. Obviously the copyright situation worries me, that writers aren't being compensated for their work. But it just lowers the standards, the standard of publishing and literacy and what we accept as good writing. It is a worry. I think we should all be worried
with it. Karen has another question, and I think we'll move on from AI after this, hopefully. Would you use AI for editing, or
No.
would you let an author run it through AI, other than typos and grammar checks? Would you?
We had an author recently. He said, "Oh, I just want to run this through AI," and I said, "Well, we don't want you to run it through AI. We don't want this content out into the digital space. People say, oh, it's private, it's my own AI, I pay for it, but it's not. We don't want this book now put in its entirety at final proof stage to be put through an AI engine. No."
No, people. Having, paying your $30 a month or whatever you might want to pay for Claude or GTP is very different to universities and businesses paying for a enterprise level AI where all of their material is ringed. I'm going to assume it's more than $35 a month.
Yeah, there's no way. In fact, I stopped paying for my AI subscription. I just thought I'm just going to be careful about what I put in AI when I'm asking questions, because I don't think that $30 a month protected me from copyright infringement or privacy at all. I agree.
Indeed. One of the questions that has come through, and we do encourage all the people listening to put questions into the chat, is about Substack as one of the social medias. Is there a preferred? Like, when you're looking at an author and seeing what their social media presence is, what's the first one that you go to?
The first one I look at in business publishing is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, Substack to a secondary degree, but I think that's just because that's my subject matter is more business. Instagram, I know it sounds silly, but more and more serious authors are using Instagram as well to support their Substack or their YouTube so it's more than one platform, but I would say my business one would be LinkedIn, YouTube.
And what are you looking for on LinkedIn? What are you expecting to see that's going to go, yes, I'm interested?
And the number of connections, but also the engagement. With the level of the comments, are people really engaged, or that's just like a passing like from half a dozen people, or are people engaged in certain posts?
Right. So it's not just the production, but it's the feedback.
Yeah.
It's that communication going back and forth.
Yeah.
What about in Substack? Is that something that or is that a little bit more off just for certain authors want to do a Substack? Because I'm assuming that not every author is suitable for a Substack.
Not everybody's author suitable for Substack, because Substack requires a lot more hard work. You've got to write something, and you've got to write something meaningful. So a lot of our business authors, they haven't got the time or the energy to put into Substack. I would think that would be more, people who are writers as a profession, I guess. I think, yeah.
Yes. Or something like the few Substack that I do follow is usually politics.
Right.
So they're very often coming from journalists or from independent journalists mainly. And I would think, that is their job. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Sorry, just looking at some other questions coming through. What sort of length is there in a non-fiction book, say in the business sector? How long does it remain relevant and current? And what do you do to keep it rolling along and keep it relevant and current?
Yeah. So some we try to edit so that the books don't date don't date immediately. So I suppose you're looking for at least 3 years, and then have a look at the content. Does it need revising? If it's done well, we'll go back to the author and say, this book's done really well. Can we put it in a new edition? Can we put a couple of new chapters in? Do you want to revise it, or do you want to write a second book? And the sales lifetime of a book is always going to be, most sales are going to be in the first 6 months, the first 12 months, and then the sales are going to, there's going to be a long tail of sales. But when we're contracting, we always want an ad infinitum contract rather than a capped term.
Mhm.
Although we will agree to a capped term at times, but ideally we'd like to have it, for the life of the book, however long that will be.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of contracts, and you mentioned earlier that you're looking at the international market now a lot more
Mhm.
closely than you did in the past.
Yeah.
Do you like to, with your authors, get international copyright and international rights?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Always global rights. Global rights. Yeah.
yeah. And what sort of markets are you particularly focusing on? Are you looking at translation as well at the same
We
time?
do. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Rockpool has a very vibrant rights business. They go to London every year and Frankfurt every year and always have a stand. And I went with them last year and they're back-to-back meetings. So yeah, rights are a big part of their business. Um, yeah. But look, our main market is Australia and always will be Australia, I think.
Yeah.
So it has to fly in Australia, and then unless well, no, that's not true actually. I'm just commissioning a book by a UK author, so the majority of the sales will be in the UK, smaller sales here. If it's an Australian American author, majority sales Australia and here. But I would say, as a percentage of sales across the whole list, I would say that 70% will be Australian and 30% at the moment will be from other territories.
Yeah. Is there is there a marked difference, do you think, in your publishing to fiction and to fiction publishing in terms of like the mix of the ebook and the audiobook? Do audiobooks in particular sell well in your genre?
Well, my authors always say, oh, everyone's asking for me in audio for an audiobook, but the audiobook figures show that the majority of business audiobooks are the really big titles. So it is your Atomic Habits and your Diary of a CEO. And then the smaller authors, their audiobooks aren't selling in great numbers. And the return from audiobook sales is very, very low because you rarely buy an audiobook. You have an audiobook subscription and you get your free one every month with Audible or something. Or if you pay for it, you pay like $2. So we get the amount of money you get from an audiobook makes it very difficult to get a decent return on your investment. So most of our audiobook publishing is done through Belinda. So Belinda are selective. They don't take everything, but we would pitch all our titles to Belinda and we're delighted when they take them on board and take them to market for us.
Yeah. Well, how do you have that discussion with the author about, um, they're being told, oh, I would get your book, but I need it as an audio because I don't have time to read and I want to listen to it.
Yeah, so if
Yeah,
we
so,
can't, so I always tell them right from the outset, if we're not successful in selling the audiobook rights to a strong audiobook partner like Belinda, then we will revert the audiobook rights back to the author and they can produce it themselves. And there are platforms that they can put it on. They can record
mhm.
it, they can put it on what's called Findaway Voices, the platform we used to use a couple of years ago. But yeah, there are kind of self-publishing audio book platforms that they can put it on and make it available in audio.
Yeah. What about the ebook market?
Yeah, so all our books are done as an ebook at the same time as they go to press. Um, 10% sales probably on ebook. Sometimes more, but no, yeah, small really for us.
Why do you think that is?
I personally don't like reading Kindle on Kindle.
I
I,
think I've got like three just gathering dust around the house somewhere. Yeah.
yeah,
There's
I
always
don't
a
like.
great hope that it's going to work, but then somehow it just doesn't. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah,
But as an industry, do you think this is like typical for your sector that
I think for
it's
my
still very
sector it's
much print?
typical. I
Yeah.
think people who are the voracious readers of romance or I don't know, fantasy would probably be Kindle readers, ebook readers. But for business, I think there's still a small percentage. It's always been a smallish percentage for ebooks.
Do you think this is because these books are like kept and they're highlighted and underlined and
Yeah,
so
I
on,
also
like
think maybe
returned to?
the business reader is reading online all day. They don't want to get a device out and read it in the evening. But it's a bit hard to make sweeping statements like that. But that is one thing that they're online all day. They're looking at screens all day.
Yes, yes. We do have a question from Robin, who's sort of gently pushing back on the social media presence and saying like it's a lot of work, which is taken away from the writing. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
and an author comes to you and says, "Look, I'm busy writing. I'm doing the business of writing. This is what I'm good at. I'm not
Mm.
particularly good at social media."
Yeah.
What sort of conversation would you have with them? And let's assume that you've looked at the book and you go, okay, there, this is good. This is something that I think we can work with. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it still would be really hard for me to get it across the line with our in our acquisitions meeting. That's just yeah, that's just the way in my area of publishing. It might be different for fiction. If you're not on social media, then you could be doing more face to face. You could be doing workshops or keynotes, that kind of thing. Yeah, but it pains me to say it, but without a social media platform, it is very difficult for me to get that across the line.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we hear that not just from you, but we hear that from
Mm.
publishers all the time,
Yeah,
that one of the first things that the marketing department looks at. And in large publishing houses, you have, the editor, but then you have the marketing department, and it's sort
mm.
of, where does
Yeah,
the power lie in terms of getting that book across the line?
yeah,
And the
yeah,
marketing do want to know how many people can we reach out to immediately and
yeah,
easily to actually start to spread this,
yeah.
which is, I suppose that's just something that is part of the industry. Robin's pushback, she says, I'm not talking about zero social media, this saying monthly posting with daily posting. But from what I can see, you're not talking so much about the content and the regularity, but the engagement is also
Yeah,
very,
it's the engagement. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Whether you get people, whether you're part of that conversation or you're just,
yeah.
shouting
And
into the wind.
you don't need to be daily posting. It could be one good post a week, and that gets a lot of engagement.
Yes, yes. Okay, so we're going to look forward to the future now. And a question did come through earlier about the wellness market. Do you see any trends emerging in the next couple of years in the wellness market?
I've seen what uh, trends over in the recent past towards exploring neurodiversity. I think that is a bit of a topic at the moment. We've seen more trends in, well, subjects that weren't talked about in the past, like menopause, quite the menopause conversation, menopause in the
Mhm.
workplace. Menopause is a subject that is talked about. There's always talk about work-life balance, a wellness subject. There's always conversations that people are interested in that. Um, and the mental health space as well. I think that is a trend people are going to be exploring, how to stay mentally healthy as well as physically healthy.
Yes, yes, no, all interesting topics.
Mm.
One more question, I think, from the audience, and then we're going to have to come towards a wrap up. What are the best marketing tactics, Sue asks, for your authors' books? Is it podcasts? Is it book tours? Is it launches at bookshops?
Yeah, I think we do as much of that as possible. There's never one thing. And I think these days, they used to say in advertising that I think it was you had to see something 7 times before you were going to make that purchase. And it's a bit like that as well. So we do as much pre-publication marketing as we can so that the book gets, as soon as it's released, we've got a decent number of sales. Then we do the launch. Then we do the ongoing social media. Then we reach out for people who've bought the book to post a review on social media or in
Hmm.
Goodreads or something like that, and the word of mouth. So there's not one thing, there's all different, as many things as possible.
So that's something that you would do. You'd be reaching out to people who have purchased the book to,
Yeah.
yeah. How would you do that? What sort of approach would you make?
We have a monthly newsletter, so we would encourage people to do that. We have like a sort of checklist that we give to the authors for them to send it out on their social media. If you've read this book, give us a, give us a review, give us a post. If I mention a book on my LinkedIn and people say, "Oh, it's a great book, I love that book," then I'd say, "Oh, would you mind giving it a review on Goodreads or on Amazon?" So yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Are they powerful indicators of, for people's preferences, the Goodread and Amazon reviews?
I think so. I read them myself. Yeah, I think so.
Do you follow certain people, or is it, are you crassly like me, just sort of looking at how many points it gets and then sort of making a
No,
judgment?
I don't.
Or
I don't follow
yeah,
anybody. I will have a look on Goodreads. I will have a look on Amazon to see the number and then the kind of comments that they're making.
okay.
Yeah,
And that would be part of your research also in coming into authors
yeah.
and looking at what
Especially
they've
when
done in
if they're
the
doing a
past.
second book, if they've already been published, one of the things I will do is go and have a look at the Amazon reviews.
Mm, mm. I've just got one last question, which is a little bit, second last question, a little bit outside the wheelhouse. Um, is self-publishing or independent publishing in your sphere, um, is it a possibility?
Yeah, so that's often if I think the author is has got a good book, but I don't think it's commercial enough for us to do because they haven't got a platform. Then
Hmm.
I will say to them, it's, you've written a great book, fantastic. You should explore the route to self-publishing. And then that sometimes is a stepping stone to getting a commercial publisher after that. So if the first book does quite well, then they'll come back. They've got, a stronger case for you. In fact, I've just published a book by an author this week who came to me 3 years ago with the book, and I said, "Look, it's a great book, but we don't know you. No one knows who you are." He self-published it. He came back to me with his second book, and on the strength of his first book, we've just published his second book.
Okay, yeah. So it is. There are many different pathways, isn't
Yeah,
there, for the
yeah.
first your traditional publishing things. Okay, one last question. Thank you so much for the time that you've given. I do apologise to everyone for the interruption that we had towards the middle there. Um, what are you reading not related
Uh-huh.
to being published?
Okay, so what I've read recently, which I loved, is John of John, the
Mhm.
Douglas Stewart, Shuggie Bain
Yeah.
author, which had huge, everybody loved it, and I loved it. And I read it really slowly, which was nice because it's kind of a slower book than his other books. I don't know if you've read him, but he's brilliant, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed reading it slowly. And then on the non-fiction, I'm reading a book called Mindfuck by Chris Wiley, and it's the Cambridge Analytical story, which is fascinating, which basically Steve Bannon, with the help of Cambridge Analytica, skewed the Trump election results. And it is what amazes me is they were doing all this stuff in 2012, 2014. Imagine what they're doing now with all our data. It is frightening.
And on that cheery note, Lesley, on that cheery note, indeed. Thank you very much for your time. That was absolutely fascinating. And again, apologies to the people watching for that break in the middle. Thanks to Annabelle, who's been behind the scenes here at Writing New South Wales, working with the chat and putting up links as she run through. And to you and the audience for your questions and your engagement. It was great to see so many of you online. If you're not already subscribed to Newsbite, which is our weekly new email newsletter, lets you know when events such as this are taking place, as well as all the other services that we offer here at Writing New South Wales, please make sure you do so. You can get the details on the website at Writing New South Wales. A video of this will come onto our YouTube channel, which again you can access either through just Googling Writing New South Wales YouTube or through our website in the next week or so. So just give us a little bit of time. Again, Lesley, thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone much for joining us, and we'll see you at our next First Friday. Farewell.
Thanks, guys. Good luck with your writing.
Indeed.
Bye.